Hey everyone, it's Hydro Pump here. Today I'm going to be doing a deck profile interview with no other than your Ribbit Invitational Rulers Champion Prostorm. And he's
Yo,
here
what's
with
up?
me.
Hey, everyone.
Hey Prostorm, how's it going? We got your fairy deck here that you got first place with for the Edison tournament, which is pretty hype. It's probably like the biggest tournament we had so far. Biggest Edison tournament since the actual event, probably. I'd have to say, like Edison, New Jersey, from 12 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like the biggest in terms of entrance,
Yeah,
but it was definitely the best players, I'd say. It was pretty cool actually. All the participants had to earn their invite by top eighting one of the previous events, and those events are usually what 100 and 200 players, so like a small local. And yeah, everyone played really well. It was just a lot of fun playing against top tier players.
yeah, there was about like 40 some players that played, so yeah, it was pretty competitive. I also got to play, but I didn't do as well. I think I technically got like top 16 or something like that, but doesn't matter. So you want to talk about like leading up to the tournament because we talked a lot beforehand, and then we did some testing as well. So I just want to get your thoughts on how are things leading up to the tournament.
Definitely. Well, actually, at first I was considering mostly not playing in the tournament because I'm traveling right now in Southeast Asia. It's a really weird time zone, and I'm only on my mobile. So like being on mobile at a weird time zone just felt a bit weird. And so yeah, I had originally decided I wasn't gonna play. But leading up to like the 2 weeks before, I started getting the itch again, and I felt like, yeah, I already had my invite, and because I had multiple invites, I had to buy first round. It'd be kind of a shame not to use it. So then I started grinding again in the last 2 weeks, and it was hard to pick a deck choice. I think I was debating between three or four different decks at the time. I started off with, of course, Fairy as my top favorite deck. It's the one I've played the most. It fits my playstyle a lot. I'm just very comfortable with it across all the different matchups. But one day when testing while I was playing DB randoms, I think I went 0 and 4. I mean, there's a lot of bad luck involved, but you never want to go like 0 and 4. And then that's when I decided, like, no, I can't play this. It's a deck that requires really solid technical play. And I figured if I'm out of shape, if I'm playing at 2 a.m. on mobile, it just makes it really difficult. So I thought, why don't I play an easier deck? So then I started thinking about Dragon Turbo and figured, if I draw the nuts and just sack everyone, I'm just gonna win. So it doesn't matter if I'm on mobile or 2 a.m. The cards will just lead me to victory. So we started playing a bunch of Dragon Turbo games and testing. But I just bricked a bit too much and decided to move away from that. And then the third deck I started considering was actually Trap Dragons. I talked with Keegan a lot about Trap Dragons, and my list was actually very similar to his. That one, that small Edison side event, the one with the three DD Warrior ladies, is actually really solid in testing and didn't really have any bad matchups. Um, like the worst matchup is probably Frogs, and I actually did really well against Frogs in testing. So I was gonna play that. I think in random testing I went like 40 and 3 or something ridiculous. It was just like really good. But then I was playing Caleb and internally, and Caleb, he only plays fairies, and like Caleb destroyed me. I think he beat me 6-0, and I was like playing pretty solid, and I know how to play against fairies, but I didn't have a side for fairies because I didn't expect anyone else to bring fairies. And yeah, he just destroyed me, and that got me thinking to go back on fairies for the main event. So yeah, I went a full circle back to fairies, and that's how it happened.
Yeah, you were flip flopping quite a bit, and then we got to the point where because we definitely wanted to get the Blackwing matchup down pat, despite what we were playing against. So we had to like we just like you and I ran a lot of matches of like Fairy versus Blackwing and stuff like that. I think that was the only one we did individual testing with, but uh, yeah, it's nice to see
Yeah,
you
I mean,
went on with Fairy though.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess shout out to Caleb for slapping me with fairies and getting me to play the deck. Otherwise, I probably would have played dragons. And yeah, like with the fairy deck, I think the worst matchups are Lightsworn and Quick Draw. And I knew there would probably only be one or two Quick Draw players in the tournament, so I was just hoping to dodge that. And with Lightsworn, it's kind of 50-50. If they open like Milling Wolf and have Celestia Honest in hand, it's really hard for me to win. But I figured like most decks lose to those hands anyways. And if I see
Yeah.
Christia and I can drop it early, like it's really hard for Lightsworn to beat me. And yeah, so then Blackwing was the other matchup I really wanted to test against. And we did some testing, and even though you won, like I think like 6-3 in overall testing, like the first five
Oh
games,
yeah.
I was like winning all of them, and you sacked me hard every game. Like you had Dad turn two like every game, and you would either top deck Brain Controller or Storm when you had like no rights winning. So like even though I lost all those games, like I still felt pretty confident because I knew the only times I lost to Blackwing were when they opened really busted. And once again, like every deck loses to those busted hands, Shura, Whirl, Set Solemn, and Icarus, like with Dad in hand. Not many decks are beating those opens, right? So yeah, I decided to go with Fairy. Um I figured like it doesn't have any bad matchups per se. Like even the worst matchups are still maybe 45, 55, I feel like. And I feel most of the top players, they just don't have much experience playing against Fairy. So that's another advantage for me. A lot of my opponents, they made small mistakes uh, that I was able to capitalize on. And I think if they had more experience playing against fairies, they probably wouldn't make those mistakes, like leaving a beater in attack mode for me to crash and drop
Oh yeah.
Christia, or just keeping in bottomless, things like that. So,
Yeah, a lot of
so
people
yeah, it
usually
was
stay away
almost like
from
a road trip.
fairy. Yeah, a lot of people usually stay away from fairy playing it in the past just because it's a relatively difficult deck to play. But like, so since a lot of people don't play it, they don't get a lot of matchups versus it or testing versus fairy. So you were kind of just able to like go undercover in a way and just and you know how to play the deck really well. So you're able to take advantage of that. But do you
Yeah,
want?
definitely. When my opponents don't have solid game plans, it just helps a lot.
Yeah,
And yeah, I guess we can get into the 55 now,
yeah,
the main and the sideboard.
yeah. Do you need me to screen
So yeah,
share or do you have
no,
it?
no,
Oh,
it's
okay,
all good.
okay,
I,
cool.
I know it by heart. So yeah, I guess the first topic is number of Christia. Everyone has a different opinion. I've always been on the three Christia train since day one. It's the best card in the deck. It's the card that lets you win. It's one of the few plus ones. So many decks in the format complain about losing to oppression. Well, Christia is like a oppression that goes plus one. It's 2800 body, and it's really hard to remove it. Just because it keeps stacking itself. So it's just crazy not to play three in my opinion. I understand the logic of how drawing multiples and them being dead, but I've had played maybe like I don't know how many matches with Fairy now, like maybe 500 between 500 and 1,000, and I win way more games by seeing Christia early than I do by bricking on two or three Christia. It's just like not even close. It's the card you want to see because all of a sudden your recruiters become threats. And it allows you to play a grind game. And yeah, like I said, so many decks just can't deal with oppression. So Christia is just oppression on steroids. I always play three, and yeah, it's also going back to what I said earlier. Your worst matchups: Lightsworn, Frogs, Quick Draw. Those are all matchups where you want three Christia in. Because if you don't see Christia, like there's almost no way you're winning. So it's just a card you want to see. Then for matchups where it's kind of bad, like Hero Beat, you can always side copies out. But yeah, always play three Christia.
Yeah,
Never brick.
I think
Always draw to one. Yeah.
yeah, I think three Christia is probably just needed because you're boss monster. Then if you're not playing Christia, like what are you really doing? Like you're just floating on recruiters and trying to get there with DD Warrior Lady, which I think Christia's is like it's kind of like JD where it's like oh they have three Lightsworn so they get one Lightsworn in the grave then JD, but it's kind of even more scary with the recruiters because you can just crash and then get the fairy count that you need. Um, so I think opening those cards is crazy. You can just lock out a lot of matchups early on, and then you have stuff to get. You can dump it with Herald, or you can call the haunted or return it back. So there's a lot of ways to get to it.
For sure. It's definitely just a card you want to see and play. And yeah, maximizing your chances of seeing it is just really important for winning.
Yeah.
I guess that the next topic is the recruiters. People play between 4 and 6 recruiters. I go for 6 because, of course, I have 3 Christia, so you want to see your starters. And tr historically, I always found that if my first recruiter got answered by Raiko, Caius, D Prison, that kind of stuff, it's just really hard to win. Because then you just start bricking on heralds or just you don't have the body to get your Christia online. So yeah, I like playing 6 because I just want to see my starters as often as possible. Um, and I guess the other thought is with because I go over 40, so with 42, um, it slightly decreases the chances of bricking with 3 or 4 recruiters early on. That's really the only time it's bad. But sometimes you can turn like recruiter in hand into herald fodder, so it's not the absolute worst. But yeah, once again, it's just you want starters in this deck. You don't want to lose to bricking, and so yeah, running the 6 recruiters, it's nice. They're versatile. They get me whatever I need in any situation, and they're sticky. Like a lot of decks just struggle to deal with recruiters. So yeah, they block attacks, deck thin, and I don't think I'd play less than 6 if I'm ever on 3 Christia.
Yeah, it's kind of like you said with Chrisia, like you rather open it than like never see it, and it's okay if you like open it. You rather brick on a couple times with Chrisia rather than just not seeing it. And I think with Fairy, like my few times of playing it, like if you don't open a recruiter, like you don't really have a good opening play available, and you don't have a way to float into your other stuff. So I definitely agree with 6 recruiters. I think it's like really strong, and then, again, it lets you be flexible, like you said. So big fan of 6 recruiters.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the next topic, which is a bit controversial, is the Dialks. I actually cut Dialk to 2 in this list for several reasons. Most lists always play 3, but I started to kind of like or dislike Dialk more and more in all my games. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a crazy busted card. But the main problems with Dialk is one, like I think the number of monsters you want in your deck for 3 Dialk is 25. Anything less than 25, you're gonna start missing on your Dialk mills. And so you see in this list, I'm actually only playing 23, I believe.
Yeah,
Um, and um, the other problem with Dialk is a lot of times if you open Dialk as your only starter, and you kind of have to just go for the blind mill. Anytime I've missed on a Dialk mill, like I almost always lose because then the Dialk gets run over. You don't get your like um neutral exchange. You're behind on tempo and you just straight up lose. So I wanted to avoid situations where I had to lead on Dialk and pray for the mill. And I figured like 2 is more than enough because I have Call of the Haunted, I have, Return and Cyber Valley um, to make use of the Dialks. And yeah, I mean, I guess like playing 3 would mean I'd have to play more monsters. Playing more monsters would mean I would open like
more
Ground
monsters.
Town more often.
Yeah,
And that's usually, I mean, don't get me wrong, if I open Herald, Christia, and some recruiters, it's a really strong hand. But if I'm opening like 3 recruiters, Dialk, DD Warrior Lady, like that's a really weak hand because that's effectively just one playable card. Um,
yeah,
yeah, so those are like I guess the main reasons I went with 2 Dialk. I definitely missed it sometimes because it's a really good source of pressure to beat over stuff like Gilman, trade with their DD War Lady, trade with Stratos. But I felt 2 Dialk was right and it was okay.
yeah. It kind of, like you said, it's not really. It's more like the good secondary monster to summon because you rather go with the recruiter first and then cycle through that a little bit, and then you want to hit alchemist like after that to summon him after you get that initial recruiter set up, so you're not missing on the return. So yeah, I agree with 2. Like it's nice to have the beater, but you don't open too many like normal summons like you said. So I think 2 is like a pretty good number.
for sure. And well, I forget what comes next on my list, how I organized it, but I guess the next thing I can discuss is Raiko. A lot of lists play between 0 and 3 Raiko. I personally like the one of. I probably would have cut Raiko altogether, but because I play Mind Control, just Mind Control on Hamster for Raiko is just too big of a power play to pass up on. And Raiko being spot removal is never bad. If you play rogue stuff like D-Fisher Macrocosmos, Raiko pops that, Raiko pops Ab-Zero, Raiko pops Duplock. It's not a bad card, but I definitely don't want to play multiples because then you're just opening too many normal summons. And in going second, especially, it's a bit slow. In a zombie format as well, you don't want or Vayu zombie format, right? You don't want goblin zombies and Vayus poking into Raikou. That's pretty bad trade. And even with Black Wings, Raikou is supposedly pretty good against Black Wings, but I found in testing usually it's just taking a Bora hit, so that's like not what you want. Raikou for Bora is like pretty bad trade actually, because you always want to banish the Bora with DD Warrior Lady and yeah, it just turns on their blizzard, and you're taking 1600 damage, which is quite significant. So yeah, I like the one Raikou.
Yeah. Hey, yeah, I agree. You probably don't want flood. Like again, you already have enough normal summons as is, and it's also not fairy, so you can't like herald it or. Something cool though is that it kind of it's like mind games your opponent because you can just set a monster and they have to guess between DD Warrior Lady, Recruiter, or Raikou. So if you're not playing Raikou, then they can eliminate one of those options. So I kind of like that aspect of it.
Yeah, definitely. I guess setting in this deck is quite strong because people don't know what could happen. You really don't want to attack into a set blind because that probably just plays into my game plan of recruiters and getting what I need. But then if you don't attack, maybe I have a set Raikou, I flip it, then I have a Book of Moon to reuse it and just get really far ahead. So yeah, it's just having the versatility is nice.
Yeah, and it kind of plays into your game plan. Like if they're not putting pressure, like you're just kind of. I think the longer the game goes, the better off the fairy deck is probably is just because you just get so much advantage going and toolboxing through your deck and stuff. So I think it works
Yeah,
pretty
I mean
well.
the long game really favors the fairy deck. I think every game with the fairy deck, you always want to try to play the long game. Just because their late game power cards are so strong between Return and Christia, and it's like those two cards are just complete blowouts. And usually you just out advantage your opponent because DD Warrior Lady just removes any monster threat. So Ab-Zero, any Synchro, besides Revive King Hades, Machina Fortress, all of these things. And then you just recycle it back with Dialk. You go +1 with Freed. You have all these traps. It's just, you're going to lose the long game if you grind with Fairy, unless you play Quick Draw. That's like the only deck that
Yeah,
can outgrind Fairy in the long game. But yeah.
and I guess maybe with this the way Blackwings have been, they've just been going more turbo, turbo, turbo with playing like this Nolan for spot back row removal and stuff. So like I don't know if that deck's really geared for a grind against fairy. So like I mean it just plays into your favor even more. So but
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we'll get into that in the side deck choices
yeah,
later, but I thought one of the main reasons I liked Fairy was I thought it had a really good Blackwing matchup. And yeah, I came prepared for that, of course.
yeah,
I guess in the main deck, some other interesting topics are Freed and Soul. A lot of lists play between 0 and 2 Soul. My first RBT top in RBT 1, I played 0 Soul as well. I played 2 Freed at the time. And here I play one Freed in the main, one Freed in the side, 0 Soul. My issue with Soul is, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's the games where I've dropped Soul have been pretty good. If you drop Soul, you flip Return, or it's like pretty strong play. But my issues with Soul are one, it doesn't answer on-field threats like Caius, Ab-Zero, JD, Catastor, even Armed Wing. Like, sure, Armed Wing can attack, but I can't pressure as well. It's kind of a weird stalemate. Number two, it makes my opponent's bottomless trap hole better game one. So if you see in the whole deck, I don't have any cards that lose to bottomless. Freed and Christie are like the only ones. But Frida is already getting a +1 when it hits the field, so I don't mind. And same with Christia. Like if you bottomless Christia, I'm already getting my +1. So it really doesn't matter. Where Soul just plays into bottomless, it plays into oppression. It makes the deck's weakness of not having the fairies in the graveyard worse. I found that probably 99% of my games I lose because I only get one or two fairies in my graveyard before I get like killed. And yeah, Soul doesn't help with that. Soul helps manage your graveyard if you go more than four. But I found that games where I go more than four are really, really rare. Um, Especially with only one right code, I almost never go more than four. And yeah, I think the only times I go more than four are like versus quick draw, like a really big grind game. But yeah, like it's happened maybe once every 100 matches. So I don't think that point is too relevant. And yeah, the last point in terms of making synchro plays with Soul, like if I have Soul and Herald, I'd much rather save Herald in hand as effect negation because when you're committing Herald onto the field, you get really blown out by Book of Moon, by Compulse, by Phoenix Wing Wind Blast. So I really don't want to lose to those cards. And I felt yeah, I just rather have Herald in hand to stop any weird shenanigans, and just pressure with like anything else. So yeah, those are my main reasons for not playing Soul and going for Freed. Freed is an insane card. I think every round I dropped Freed and it went +1. I just answer so many boards. And yeah, it's definitely one of my favorite cards in the deck. I just call Freed +1 because it's broken.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely like Freed a lot, and I remember when like we were like theorizing the deck like for Ribbit one, and like you were playing two to sort of get rid of Absolute Zero because it was really popular at the time. So I still like keeping the one and then siding the other. What do I guess we could talk about once we get to the side. But I was gonna ask about Freed in the side as well. But we can just wrap up the main deck or whatever else you want to talk about here.
For sure. I guess Cyber Valley and mind control is another hot discussion topic. It's something that wasn't really played in Fairy for the longest time, but um, I was talking with Keegan a lot about the deck, and then we both decided like Mindcon Cyber Valley was pretty nuts. Like Mindcon gives you have conversion with Herald, but just one of the things that the Fairy deck really struggles with is high defense monsters like Spy, Hamster, Snowman Eater. So Minecon any of those and you go like it's really nice. And if you have Cyber Valley to convert, that's a nice +1. So for a deck that doesn't have a lot of +1s, it's just really nice to get ahead. Minecon improves the GB matchup as well. It's just a way to steal their GB, play around Chariot, and go big on tempo. Um, yeah, and it's definitely like Cyber Valley helped me a lot in my matches because it just helps me dig deeper into my deck. Draw two is pretty powerful, synergizes well with return, and yeah, it just helps me find return, find Christia, find Storm, just find those cards, and yeah, occasionally like I'll use Cyber Valley's other effect, like its third effect once I used in testing to just go from 5 fairies to 4. I think I stacked an honest and then I dropped Christia, so that was like a pretty cool interaction.
That's pretty funny.
And then finally, what did happen in the tournament was, I made Chimera Tech off Cyber Valley once. That happens like quite often actually. If my opponent keeps Hydra in, just Recruiter Crash, end on Cyber Valley, Contact Fuse. It's quite nice.
Yeah, I really like the flexibility of the card because like playing Minecon and BrainCon, like it works with Valley, but also works with Herald because you can do a synchro play, and then so it just leaves you like I think like in Ribbit one, I believe you played Smashing Grounds in the main deck, but I think this is probably just like a better alternative to that and a bit more flexible. Minecon and Valley.
Yeah, definitely. The River One Smashing Call was honestly I was very afraid of Ancient Gear because that deck was kind of popular in randoms leading up to Ribbit One. And I think Ancient Gear Beast really destroys this deck. Like I always have a lot of trouble outing it. And I was worried about D Fisher GBs. I was worried about Gravekeepers. And I knew Abzero was everywhere, so that's why I was playing the Smashings. But in hindsight, like like there's a few lessons. One was you can't get perfect coverage for every single deck. Like sometimes you just gotta accept, I'm weak to this matchup, but just hope to dodge it. And just not weaken my 55 overall to compensate for like a really rogue matchup. And number two is just I think the format's much faster now. So smashing is just a bit too slow. You need interaction on during your opponent's turn to just not die. Book is really helpful for that, and book stopping whirlwind searches is huge. And stopping like GB plays when they have when they have trap stun, it's also huge. And like the third point is Book of Moon really helps the Lightsworn matchup. It just stops their mills and yeah, lets you out aggro them before they get JD online.
Yep, all makes sense. Yeah, so I was just comparing Valley Mind Control compared to Smashing Ground, kind of just like as spot removal in a sense. Um,
Yeah, that makes sense. And the thing is, like, Valley is easily searchable, right? Like,
yeah,
anytime I have Brain or Mind, like, I'm just one recruiter away from getting Valley. So it's just, it happens much more often than you'd think. I'm basically playing seven Cyber Valleys, right?
yeah, that's why I was thinking. It's like so broken. Like the recruiters are just crazy in this deck. You can get like literally anything you want, and it's so nice. Um, I think the main thing we haven't really talked about was probably just like Gores and the trap lineup. If you want to go through those, or just like the
Yeah, I mean, Gores is pretty self-explanatory. It's just such a busted card. And I think the trap lineup is mostly self-explanatory. Play all the broken traps. It's a control deck after all. I think one notable exclusion is the Royal Oppression from main. Um, just makes sense because I'm on three Christia already, and if you're expecting a lot of Blackwings, Vayu, I don't really need the Oppression. I thought the zombie matchup was okay already. And I guess the hot tech was Legacy of Yadagarasu and why I went to 42. Um, so I started playtesting with Legacy in all my builds, including the Dragon builds, just because I thought the Blackwing Turbo deck with Nobleman of Extermination was really running around a lot. I think for DDB2, what Blackwing's made up like 30 or 40% of the entrance, something absurdly high. And yeah, so I play tested Legacy for a week, and it actually performed really. I thought it'd be meme, but it performed really well. Like I got maybe 100 matches in, and it kept baiting removal. Like I would always go +1 off of blind MST, off Raikou target, off Icarus, off Nobleman of Extermination. Like it's really funny. My opponent would play, or even like baiting early storm, right? Like I'll set two, Legacy and like a Deep Prison or something, and then my opponent does storm, and I chain Legacy. So now I just baited one of their power cards into like a 1-for-1 removal, and I don't have to respect storm for the rest of the game, which is huge because that's another way fairies typically lose. You play so many traps, but you don't usually run road. And then you lose to like a storm blowout, or you're forced to solemn. Then you lose to like BrainCon or Caius, something like that. So yeah, baiting storm early is nice. And then of course the power play of having Legacy and Gores in hand is super strong.
yeah.
In a tournament alone, like I played Legacy into Gores like twice. It's really strong because if you pass with an open field, usually like good opponents will just not swing into Gores unless they had a Gale or Raikou Caius follow up. But when you have back row, they're like, okay, let me test the back row. It's probably deep prison or bottomless or like something dead. And then yeah, you drop cores and it's like a big, huge reversal. So Legacy outperformed a lot. There's a few times where like, you draw it late and where you need like a more live card, but that only happened like twice out of 100 games. So I decided let me keep it in. And yeah, it performed well this weekend.
Yeah, I saw a couple games where you got the Legacy Gores combo off, and also just baiting back row is really strong. I know Dust Tornado Nobleman's really big right now, and the other cards also like Heavy Storm. It's just crazy. Uh, that's something about the main deck is just
Yeah, yeah.
like
I mean, also like, yeah, even sorry, just a few other points on Legacy.
yeah,
Like having Start Legacy, like my opponents usually play a lot more conservative. And it really helped me out. Like against Xeris, game three, he went turn one set Raikou, and I set Dust Tornado and Legacy. And he flipped his Raikou and he hit my Dust Tornado for like a -1. But he didn't know my other set, and he played around Torrential the whole game, which saved me a lot of damage. I mean, I had like other responses, but just him playing conservatively around torrential was like huge. So I was also gonna say like Legacy makes deep prison torrential like return much better post board because once they've seen Legacy, like they're gonna be gun shy, trying to hit old back row, and yeah, it just makes their traps a bit better.
Yeah, like it seems really strong, and I think it's a good exception to make the deck 42 because like you're gonna get that draw anyways, and you're planning to play the long game, so I don't really think it matters that you're playing 42. Oh, 1 second, I lost my
Yeah,
screen.
I mean, I play tested Upstart Goblins like many months ago, and I absolutely hated it because number one, I just kept drawing into more normal summon monsters, which is effectively a neg one, and two is like giving my opponent 1,000 life is really bad. I just kept missing lethal shots after because this deck actually clocks pretty quickly for like a control based deck. You have the Honest, you have the DD Warrior Lady, like damage racks up pretty quickly. And yeah, just Upstart ruined that. So I figured like that was another bonus point with Legacy. You can set it and then flip it after you've cycled through some recruiters. It just increases your chances of seeing Return, of seeing Solemn, of seeing Storm, Christia, etc. So yeah, it worked pretty well.
Yeah, this one last note on the main deck. This it seems really hard for like anyone to prepare for this deck. There's just like so many things like different options or possibilities like what your back row can be, what your set monster can be, what's in your hand. Because like if they try to get rid of the back row, you have Dust or Yada. If they try to do something with their set monster, it could be Raiko, Herald, or Nova Summoner I meant, and DD Warrior Lady. And like if they try to make a big push, you might have Herald in hand. So it's just or Honest as well. So it's just like this is a handful like trying to go head to head with this deck.
Yeah, it's definitely like pretty challenging, I'd say. Of course, I mean, whenever I play against Fairy on like online, it's always kind of annoying because I you always have to respect so much at once. You're checking the graveyard, you're worried, oh, if I trigger Herald and they drop Christian next turn, like I kind of lose, so I want to play around that. Yeah, I'd say like the deck is really strong when you see a Herald, when you see a Christia, and you have like starters. I think it's like legitimately an S tier deck when you have Herald, Christia, and a starter. But I think when you open like all recruiters, it's like a pretty
Yeah,
average deck. And I think also like making the right choices. I see a lot of people get the wrong choices off of like, what starter to lead on, when to herald, and managing a graveyard, things like that. So it's definitely a tough deck to pilot. There's a lot of like decisions. And mostly it's because you have to think not just of what cards you drop, we have to think of what cards your opponent has, what plays they might be making, and how to counter that. So I think a lot of people don't think about what their opponent might have, and it's pretty tiring. But I think that's you need to do that to play the deck well, and that's what makes it more rewarding too. If you look at this deck, there's very few sack cards, right? Like there's no Dark Arm, there's no like Black Whirlwind. um, it's just like all pretty much fair cards. I mean, Return's pretty busted, and Christie is busted, of course, but it takes like time to set up. So like almost every game I win, I feel like I had to outplay or at least like outmaneuver my opponent. So it just makes winning more satisfactory. Whereas sometimes with Blackwing or Vayu, you just open the nuts and you just sack your opponent and you feel like, yeah, that wasn't really Yu-Gi-Oh! That was just me drawing the nuts and winning because of luck, right?
yeah. Definitely, it's definitely a hard deck to pilot as well because you're playing so many more turns than probably like an average deck, so there's more room for mistakes. It's also more room for mistakes from your opponent, but um, you're the one that's playing this deck. So, anyways, I think that's gonna wrap it up for the main deck. This is pretty good explanations for everything. So we can jump into the side deck if you want.
Sounds good. Yeah. I mean, first is the decided Freed. Um, I didn't want to main deck two Freeds because I thought my normal summon count would be a bit too high. And the one of Freed always felt fine, like drawing it when I needed it. The second Freed was actually originally a Cyber Dragon, but then like you mentioned, like why not play the second Freed over Sidra? And I realized like that's actually a good point, because Sidra mostly just comes in for DDV decks, and Freed is just much better. it's almost always a +1 against Blackwing and Vayu. It cleans the graveyard too, to drop Christia if DDV hit a lot. And yeah, it answers Ab Zero, unlike Cyber Dragon. And I didn't think anyone would be bringing machines. So yeah, that was like a pretty easy replacement. I guess the next card is the two orbs. So Consecrated Light, it's a pretty big house. If you look at the Blackwing lists, they started cutting like Fossil Dyna, Ryos, and so they're really, and even Book of Moon. So the only outs to orb are Sidra, um, um, Icarus and DDV. And so that's why I decided like the two orb to my body as a shield side would be really strong against Black Wings because it shuts off like so much of their deck and just lets me like kind of auto win. And yeah, it always put in a lot of work. I think in testing I went like 9-1 against the Blackwing lists. And in a tournament I started off against Vayu and then Blackwing and Orb put in a lot of work both times. So definitely really strong. And especially in this deck because I have 6 recruiters, so I'm effectively playing 8 orbs. And even if my opponent, like, Icarus is the first one, I can find a second one off of Recruiter or recur with Christia, and it's just really hard for them to win.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was really strong in a Blackwing meta, and um, yeah, I think now maybe the lists are going to respect Orb again, so it might not be as good, but for rulers, it definitely made sense.
Yeah, and we did like a lot of testing, like you and me, Blackwings, and we even I think we were initially deciding 3 concentrate light, but like you said, you have 6 recruiters, so you're playing technically 8 concentrate light. So like you still want to play 2 in case they're getting rid of the first one, like you said, but you definitely want the second one. Um, and if you're playing 3, I guess you're like a little too light to DDV like turn 1, and that you and I realize that like deck dev is only like effective against this deck when it's like turn 0 activated, pretty much. Outside of that is like kind of mediocre.
Yeah, definitely. Like turn one DDV is the only thing I'm afraid of. And usually I can like play my hands to minimize DDV. And it makes Vayu scarier because Vayu can make turn one DDV live much more often. Like Blackwing, not so much. So yeah, that's why I thought the Vayu matchup is much harder for Fairy because you can't control that. But yeah, I mean, Freed helps even out a lot. And
And then Vayu
yeah,
also has like Raikos
if
and
they don't
such.
see DDV turn one, it's nice. Yeah, yeah.
Cool. And just a touch on the free thing over Cyber Dragon. There was probably not gonna be like any machine matchup, so you probably didn't need Cyber Dragon for this tournament, just because there's probably gonna be a lot less Rogue. And then I like free just because you can do priority pop rather than just like summoning a Cyber Dragon into like some form of removal, like bottomless if it happens to be in for some reason still, uh, or it doesn't die to oppression either if that comes in. But just like less things can go wrong, I think, with Freed than Cyber Dragon. I think the only pro for Cyber Dragon is like special summon, and then maybe you can make a synchro play or with Herald or some sort, something like that.
Yeah, I always found Cyber Dragon to be a bit mid versus Blackwings. Because if I drop Cyber Dragon, then it still doesn't help against Kalut, and it makes their blizzards better. Because I always want to be banishing with DD Warrior Lady. Uh, so if I'm siding Sidra just to dodge DDV, I might as well have Freed. Freed can pop Bryo, Goyle, Armed Wing, Armor Master,
Yeah.
like a lot of threats. Dad, it's really good actually.
Yes, Cyber can't
Sirocco.
like clear anything bigger than itself rather than Freed. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Freed, the Brave Wanderer. Um, anything else about like Thunder Kings or the Breaker here for the monsters in this
Yeah,
item?
so T King is nice. I know a lot of lists like to main deck the T Kings. I tried it for a bit. I honestly was not a fan because it just adds to your normal summon clutter. And game one, like if you summon T King, it's gonna walk into bottomless, which should be dead. Yeah, in my testing, like my T King walked into bottomless like every game, and that's why I decided to just put it in the side. Because I want to make my opponent's cards like as dead as possible. T King is nice versus Dragon Turbo, which is a pretty bad matchup for Fairy actually. And it's also good against Light Sworn and Quick Draw, surprisingly. And T-King is also nice versus zombies because you can run over Goblin Zombie and block their synchro plays. So yeah, there's like a lot of matchups I'd bring T-King in. Oh, and GBs, of course. T-King is pretty good. It's good against like Ancient Gear and machine-based decks too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a nice card for sure. I just don't want it in a main because I want my opponents to side out, they're bottomless, and then I bring in the T-King.
Yeah, I think probably having it in the side's a lot better than the main because you just want to be flexible in the main, and then you can kind of target side for a matchup with the Thunder Kings, and then I guess like people main decked it just because it's kind of pre against Goblin Zombie, but like I feel like you already have a good matchup game one against zombies because of Warrior Lady and Herald. So and like you said, game one you're walking into like third removal like bottomless and prison and such like that with Thunder King, and it doesn't really help your engine. So I think it works best in the side deck like you mentioned.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly. And then the last monster was Breaker. So Breaker is actually something I was discussing with Keegan for a long time about. And like I was trying to decide between Knock, Crow, Rivalry, and Breaker Compulse from like my last two slots. And I think what sold me eventually on Breaker was Keegan said it's a great card going second against Vayu. And I realized like that's totally true because it could pop back row, it can trade effectively with Raiko. And it's another out to light imprisoning. And because I didn't want to play Twister. And even though I have three Dust Tornadoes already, it's you always want as much removal for light imprisoning as possible. Because that's the only other way the deck loses. It's when you draw all monsters and your opponent opens like the one of two light imprisoning. So yeah, Breaker was nice and it was clutch every time I saw it too. Originally, I never liked Breaker because I thought it was another normal summon clutter. But with this list, actually, because I'm only on 23 instead of the normal 25, 26, it's much more manageable. And I think all week, all tournament long, I never really drew too many monsters. I think actually 23 was a really good call.
Yeah, I think it's you don't yeah you just don't want too many monsters. Like you need like your other cards to support you. But something cool about Breaker is that they're siding out their bottomlesses most likely because like most of your main deck, unless they're scared of Christia, but like still that's a neg one. Like it's probably gonna walk, so you don't have to worry about that removal from Breaker. So like you said with the Vayu matchup, they can have like Raiko plus Dust Tornado set. You can summon Breaker, pop the back row, and then crash into Raiko, and then it's like a plus one pretty much. So um, and it's just another flexible card to get rid of like limbs or I don't know D-Fissure if that comes up, like it's like GBs or something like that. So yeah, I think just how like having so many flexible cards is really comes in handy, and it doesn't get hit by deck dev either. So that's also nice.
For sure, yeah, dodging DDV is nice. And yeah, I think the when fairies get a plus one, it's really strong. Because the deck plays it as a like a pretty big grind game, right? Like all the cards are pretty active. You trade one for one, DD Warrior Lady, Honest, whatever, with your best monsters, and then you blow them out in the end with Return or Christia. So anytime you can get plus ones, it just makes your Herald like break even later, and yeah, you just outgrind your opponent that way. So the plus one, when you're down a card against Fairy, like it's really dangerous.
Yeah, cool. And we got the rest of the side. You got the my bodies and the traps here.
Yeah, I mean, my body's also nice against besides Blackwings, it's also nice against Lightsworn, like hitting Celestia, hitting JD, of course, and but yeah, that never really came up. Um, and the Dust Tornadoes, the three are like staple. You just need to hit floodgates and play the game. Um, and the one oppression was interesting. Like usually I sided two, but I figured I only really want two against GBs. Like everything else, I felt two is actually kind of clunky because I have three Christia and Gores, and they almost always have an out for oppression anyways. Um, But yeah, so I thought, you know, especially if I'm going second, right? Like if it's game three and I'm going second, my opponent already does like Diva into Catastor or like some like special summon play, then the oppression looks kind of bad. Or if the oppression gets wing blasted, I'm drawing a dead oppression after they make like Bryo Stardust. It's like really bad as well.
Hmm.
So yeah, I just wanted to maximize the live cards in my deck, and I thought Compulse was better for that. Like if I draw Compulse against the board of Ab-Zero or Stardust or Bryo, Colossal, like Compulse is just gonna help me reduce that pressure. And yeah, that was one point of why I played Compulse over Rug. I used to love playing the Rugs just to stop Diva, Stratos, Caius. Like Rug on Caius is like on steroids. But if I draw Rug late, it's just really, really bad. So yeah, I decided on the Compulse instead. And the Mind Crush. So I decided to Mind Crush because I had a really bad test record against Dragon Turbo, just because I can't clock fast enough. Dragon Turbo almost always gets three free draws against me. And so I'm, slamming as many beaters onto the board as possible to beat them down. Then like on the very last possible turn when they're only at like 1,000 life points, they combo off and they card destruction, hit my Herald, and then they just kill me. So I decided to mind card because I knew there'd be at least like I thought there'd be at least two Dragon Turbo players, you and Mumix. And I thought like Mind Crush is also nice against Lightsworn, which I also struggle against. And yeah, Trap Dragons too, if anyone brought that. So yeah, it didn't really come up, but it's
Yeah.
like pretty strong card.
And then you got the master restricts as well for frog decks, and I think you said you were siding against like the Blackwing matchups as well.
Yeah, I cited masks in the Blackwing matchups like in testing. I think in actual games I didn't, just because J4 he had Royal Decree main deck.
Oh, okay. Ooh,
So I was
spicy.
like game two, like I was gonna see like if he kept in a decree or not, which he did. So I didn't actually bring in the mask. But no, it did a lot of work against Gory. He basically couldn't play the game. And I thought Mask was much better than Rug at the moment because I noticed all the frog decks they were playing Solex as their like removal to Vanity's Fiend, Dyna, Christia. And so if you chain Mask and Restrict to Solex, it's just a blowout. Whereas Rug doesn't really stop that play. And actually, you get kind of bodied by Solex into Vanity's Fiend. Because against frogs, you usually side out your traps. You side out. I mean, I keep the one Raikou, but you don't have too many outs to Vanity's Fiend actually. So yeah, Mask is good for that. And I guess the last point is I like Rug against Quick Draw because it stops Debris and stops Caius. So the only two plays that matter. But because I did have space for the rugs, I thought Mask was still okay because I have Ryo. So Ryo and Mask is a pretty good combo because Mask stops Lone Fire into Titanio, it stops Caius, and then Ryo stops Debris plays. Well, it still go like one for one, but like that's still pretty solid. And Ryo beats over Hamster, which is pretty important. So yeah, I decided because I was cutting my normal side for quick draw, Ryo and Mask was suitable replacement.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Yeah, I think the biggest thing I like from the size is like the dust and the pulls, just because it's more chainable stuff that like is kind of hard for them to target your back row, uh, and try to get a push because you can just chain these back if they happen to remove it. So and that plays into your +1 strategy. So good stuff from the main and side deck. Is there anything stand out in the extra deck that you wanted to talk about?
Not really. I mean, you don't access the extra deck too much. I guess Ancient Sacred Wyvern gets a shout out because it won me the first game in winners finals. That was pretty cool. The only time I ever make Ancient Sacred Wyvern, it's almost always for lethal. So yeah,
Yeah.
when Wyvern drops, it's almost always game. That was like just pretty cool. It's funny because I always forget if Ancient Sacred Wyvern is any tuner and a light non-tuner or the other way. So yeah, I remember I had to check before just to make sure I can make my play. But yeah, so that's cool.
You can take like a
I don't think I
Sirocco or
made
something
any.
like that.
Yeah, I don't think I made any other synchros all tourney long.
Oh wow.
Oh, I made Bryo. Yeah, I made Bryo. Like Bryo's the other one I make a lot because you go Herald into Bryo and it's usually a
Yeah,
game
it's a little
push.
easier
So
for
yeah,
the summon. That's because you have level 14
Yeah,
Herald. So
sure. I added Urukuizus a while back because it's level sixes you go into quite often, and Urukuizus piercing is pretty relevant against Dandy Quick Draw. And sometimes it can actually get pretty big. I think once I got a 2700 Urukuizus, which is pretty funny.
wow.
And yeah, also I added Tempest Magician last minute because I did add the breaker. It never came up, but it'd be funny to make Tempest, drop a bunch of fairies, then drop Christia. Like that would be funny, but no, I don't. The extra deck doesn't really come up too much, because you always want to save the Herald, and if it does come up, you're probably winning the game off of return.
Yeah, it's just nice to have your options open. So uh, overall, it looks pretty solid. So we went over the whole deck, the whole 57 uh, deck list. Uh, is there anything else about the tournament or highlights you want to mention about the how everything went?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can give a quick summary of the tournament. I actually did a video with Keegan on his channel. You can check it out. It's like 2.5 hours where we go through every game and talk about the lines, the plays, the thinking. So it's pretty cool. Unfortunately, my mic sucked in that, and hopefully it's a bit better here. But yeah, like I guess you can go watch that video for more insights. Here I'll just give a quick recap. So I actually woke up at an hour past my alarm because I was dead tired and I needed some rest. So I woke up at 3
Yeah.
a.m. and 3:06 to be exact.
Wow.
And my first thought was like, great, I think I already got DQ'd. So I asked the chat, am I DQ'd? It's like, no, you only got a game one loss. I think if I woke up 4 minutes later, I would have got a game two loss and just lost round one.
That's
But
crazy because
no,
you
so
got to
I
like
started.
win the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah. And so I had to play my first round already down game one against Raikoko, who's like pretty strong player, and I had to 2-0 him, which I did. I got a bit greedy in the first game. I set pro heavy turn one, and yeah, it was a pretty fun game. And then yeah, game three was nice. We were both top decking. I double legacy into Gores and just win. I had the Gores in my hand already, and then I drew like two legacies in a row, and that was like really sick. So that was round one, and then round two I played J4, who's like pretty strong player. I think he's ranked two on ladder right now. Of course he's on a scary Blackwing list. Game one he had double whirlwind, and I actually managed to win that by finding Storm to equalize and just pressure winning off of pressure from Dialk and protecting it with traps. Then game two, I opened Orb, and he actually had the out in BrainCon. But because I sequenced my plays correctly, I was able to win. Essentially, what happened was one turn I had to choose between do I lead on Ryo or do I lead on Shining Angel? And I had Cristia's in my hand. So I led on Ryo just because one, Ryo blocked side draw from killing Orb, and two, I wanted to keep Angel in hand because if I lost my board, I can do Angel Crash, drop Christia, and that's exactly what happened. He top decked side draw, which my Ryo blocked, and he had BrainCon for my Ryo. He made Goyo, and then I was able to crash, drop Christia, and take the game from there. Where if I did the other sequence, I would have lost the game because I would have had Ryo, double Christia that were dead against his Goyo and his hand, which is all live. So yeah, that was just one anecdote of how important sequencing is in this deck. Just makes the difference between winning and losing. Then like game round three, I played Gory on Hero Frogs, and Gory's like pretty strong too. He just won the DDV tournament, and I 2-0'd him as well. So up to that point, I was like undefeated, 6-0. Game one was like pretty easy. I was able to get my Christia set up and just kill him. And then game two, I had Mask early on, and we played a nice long grind game. And I just made the right choices to. I knew my win con, I didn't rush it, and just set up a turn where I just blew him out with Christia. So yeah, that was nice. And so at that point, I was feeling pretty confident in myself. Played three strong opponents, like hadn't lost even a game yet. And then this was winter semis. I played Xeris. on zombies, and I knew he was a really strong opponent. I played him a few times before, and also I knew he won R.B.E.T 2 undefeated. And yeah, he got me game one. He just had the better hand for game one, and I didn't have Herald. That's just how it goes. Usually, he was on zombies, by the way, Diva zombies. Then game two, like I was almost guaranteed to win. I played my. I had one decision where it's like, do I make Bryonak or do I make Urquiza? And I decided on Bryonak because I was only losing to a one outer if he top deck Brain Con. Meanwhile, if I drew like any of 10 or 12 fairies out of like 30 cards, I was guaranteed lethal the next turn. So I played to like those numbers. Then of course he draws the one outer and Brain Con drops dad, and I had to top deck like one of five outs to stay in the game, which I did. It's a crazy game, and I somehow managed magically won. And then game three was like textbook fairy grind, where I was just able to outgrind him in the end and set up a return play and just kill him. So that was nice. I felt like defeated a really strong opponent, and I made it to winners finals, which meant I was guaranteed at least third place, which was pretty solid. Played Indikid and killed him game one, like turn two with the Ancient Sacred Wyvern play. I think he misplayed a bit on in this game, but I'll take the free win. Game two, I not really a misplay, but I was trying to play around his Banisher, so that led me to take an extra 1400 damage, which actually led to me losing. Whereas I probably would have stayed in the game if I didn't respect his Banisher. But I knew he had two Banishers. Then game three, like I opened broke. I opened Legacy Yan Gores and Storm and Solemn. So you
Oh,
already know what's gonna happen. I start Legacy, and he attacks into it, drop Gores, and then next turn I, set the Solemn and I go Storm for him for like five the next turn and just win.
wow.
So that was like winners final. That was the only game I thought like I really sacked my opponent. The match was over in like 10 minutes. Everything else was like pretty long gameplay and both sides having chances. Then like winners grands was like an absolute grind. The first game was like pretty long slog, and I had that sick turn where I went TT, he went road with the two ab zeros, and then I went Mirror Force Herald, and at that point he had lost all his threats except for one alias left in deck, and I had to make the decision, do I turtle up and just like deck him out, or do I like attack and hope that his sets are dead, like dead Hero Blast, Gemini Sparks, and Bottomless Trap Holes. And so like I swung with a Nova, and he had Mirror Force. I saw like Honest Enhance. I was like, okay, I can just turtle up next turn. But then he top decks his last alias. He swings, and then he has Compulse for my Honest, and I just lose. So that was like maybe a bit of a misplay from my end in game one. Then game two, like I just outgrind him. I have a nice return play, kill him. Then game three was like a huge grind. I think we both go down to like 10 cards left in deck. He's not attacking, and I'm just like trying to set up my game. I flip an impression early to stop his miracle, and that was huge. He should have solemned it, but he didn't. And then I don't think I was ever in danger of losing that game. It was just like inevitable. I was just repositioning to set up for like my own return Christia play. And yeah, and I never even dropped Christia. I just won by attacking because all his monsters were gone, and I just outgrinded him. And Cam says like the deck plays like like a chess engine, and it's kind of true. Like you're just like slowly grinding your opponent, making them play this really long game, outlasting them, one for one trading with their resources until they just have no threats left, and you're just attacking with like floaters, and it's like a brutal way to lose, I guess, but it was nice and secured the W. So it was cool. It was the first like ed tournament that I had won, so it felt really nice because I've topped like a lot of tournaments I've played in, like almost every one except R.B.E.T 2 where I just bubbled. So I felt like I've been close a lot of times, but I always like lose because of something stupid, usually because of my own misplays. So winning for once, especially against like such a stacked field, felt like really nice. And I felt like my bracket was pretty tough actually. So my round one opponent was R.B.E.T winner. Round two is like number two on a ladder with like a 70% win rate. Number three and number four were also like big tournament winners. So like it wasn't like a cakewalk by any chance means. And yeah, you always want to beat the best because it just solidifies that you didn't win by chance or by sack or anything like that. So yeah, it just felt really nice, and I'm glad I got to do it with fairies, which is one of my favorite decks, and feel like I can retire with that deck now.
Yeah, you always been pretty flexible with like your deck choices and stuff, and you've topped with fairy before, so you know you can top again or win the tournament, and then and this deck, like you said, you're like just dwindling down your opponent's resources. It kind of reminds me of like old goat format, like old goat control kind of in a sense. I guess it's technically how people think quick draw would work out. Uh, Not really, but yeah. But this is like it seems like the ultimate like +1 deck of the format in a sense. This or like I don't know. There's probably a couple others, but this is just a really flexible deck that you can. There's like a lot of room to outplay your opponent. But there's also a lot of room to mess up at like any any chance of the game. So, but congratulations for winning the tournament. You're like the Ribbit Ruler Champion. So pretty much like one of the best, or the biggest tournament uh, for Edison retro play. So congrats for that.
Yeah, thanks. It's definitely it was a surprising but nice accomplishment.
And
Oh, I guess for the new season,
and
yeah, I
what
guess for
time
the
did
new
the
season,
tournament
I'm
ends for you? Sorry.
yeah. Oh, sorry. The tournament ended at 1 p.m. So I stayed up from 3 a.m. till 1 p.m. and it was uh it was like pretty long, but
Mm.
I didn't make any egregious misplays. I did make a few like mistakes that I thought were kind of costly in the grand finals, but like they're so small that like most people wouldn't even know from watching. But yeah, it was like I talked about it in my video with Keegan. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like in
Um.
Edison form, it's
Yeah.
like this near impossible to play perfectly, just because there's like just so many hindsight decisions that like, well, it's a 50-50 on what they draw, and you just have to, you know, make the right choice, I guess. But yeah, but thanks for
Yeah.
coming on for the tournament, and I'm really happy for you that you won the whole thing. Is there anything else you want to say? Oh yeah, and shout out to Rod, Ring of Destruction team, our team. We haven't really mentioned that at all, but yeah, any shout
Yeah, I
outs?
mean, pretty lucky to have, definitely pretty lucky to have the team to play test and talk about ideas with. I think it's the best group of players in the format between Soches, Rogue, you, me, and it's just like a really good core of players to bounce ideas off of. And yeah, I guess going into next season. I'm not sure how active I'll be, just because I'll still be traveling, and but I'm definitely quite interested in taking more rogue decks and seeing what their limits are. I consider Fairy a rogue deck just because no one really played it before. Everyone's on Blackwing, Vayu, Zombies, some Ab-Zero deck, Lightsworn. So it always feels nice to win with something unique. So I have a lot of different brews going on that I think have potential. And yeah, I don't mind, I guess, not winning tournaments in place of just trying these rogue decks, because I think if you're able to win or at least top with something really unexpected, I think that just makes it more impressive. So yeah, I won't reveal what these decks are, but I think some of them are pretty slept on, and there's definitely much more innovation to be had in the format. It's definitely not solved by any means, and there's a lot of fun ideas out there worth evaluating and exploring.
Yeah, for sure. The format's really deep. Like even if there's like spurts where it's like, oh, this is the best deck. And, like for a while it was like Diva Hero, and then it turned into Vayu, and then it turned into this like Turbo Blackwing deck. So it's definitely like a couple months spurts where it's like, okay, this is the best deck. But like I feel like if you're a good player and you just play, you like perfect your deck and know how to play it really well, like you can probably just like win with just about anything really. So yeah, it's just a really flexible format. It just constantly evolves within itself. So it's always pretty fresh and something new to play with. So I'll just like one thing I wanted to say is that well, I don't really want to hear the excuse that you're on the other side of the world, on top of a mountain, Mount Everest or something, and you can't play the tournament because you just won this one. So you can't use that excuse anymore for not playing.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I'll try my best, but we'll see.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to say? Closing remarks.
No, I guess that's all.
Cool.
I think you should definitely try the fairy deck if you're a very control based player. But it's definitely very punishing. Like if you make the wrong decisions, it instantly turns into like a C tier deck. Like I'm not even kidding. When I play against bad fairy players, it's just like so easy to beat them. So yeah, it takes a while to get good at the deck, but it just makes it more rewarding, I think.
Yeah. It's like a lot with a lot of Edison decks. It's a pretty easy entry level because like the game's pretty simple. Like you're normal summoning a lot, or not like complete like not like current Yu-Gi-Oh where it's like a 50 different things going on. But it's really hard to master like any deck. I think even like the most simple decks you think would be the Black Wings. Those decks are kind of hard to like master also because you have to put so many um, things into consideration. But anyways, thanks again for joining me for this deck profile and tournament review. We went a little bit longer than we that you wanted to, but it's all good.
Yeah, always happy to chat. Thanks for having me on, and hope all the viewers found it insightful and instructive.
I'm sure they will. Well, thanks, Prostorm, for joining me, and I'll catch you guys later.